Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. It's been a few days. I've been under the weather. We're back and hoping to be continuing on like normal from here going forward. Joining me today, fresh from the rundown, Craig DeLuz. Craig, thanks for coming along for the ride today, man.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here with you again. Again for the second time in an hour.
Yes, absolutely. For those of you who did not, and if you didn't, what's wrong with you? For those of you who did not catch the rundown today, we ended at about 25 minutes ago. I was on the rundown with Craig today, and was an honor to be on with you, and thank you for coming along today. Let's see here. I want to mention as we get started, if you are watching us on Polite Society podcast feeds, either Facebook or YouTube, you can comment on those feeds. We'll get your comments on the air. If you're watching us anywhere else, go to Twitter, tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet. We'll get those comments as well. And as long as you're talking about what we're talking about, we'll put them on the air and we'll discuss them. So let's see here. Let's go ahead and get started. First story, you and I actually already talked about it on the rundown. This story coming from The Hill. The Biden administration put guidance through an open letter to ATFs or to FFLs saying this August rule now apparently they want to clarify what readily is, and they, in my opinion, they really didn't clarify it very well. What's your take on this one, Craig?
Well, back in, I want to say 2017 or 2018, the state of California tried to do the very same thing, referring to firearm parts as quote-unquote readily convertible into firearms, without really defining what readily convertible means, because readily convertible just means that it can be converted. It's in a form in which it can be converted. And I'll give you an example. This right here is a 0% lower, right? This 0% lower, if you have a CNC machine, is readily convertible into a firearm, right? In fact, when I testified before the Assembly Public Safety Committee on the bill, I ripped them a new one. It was the most hilarious testimony I think they had ever seen. Especially when I showed them how a guy used a shovel, and we've all seen that post where the guy took a shovel using basic tools and converted it into an AK. Mm-hmm. By definition, it was readily convertible. Well, what they're trying to do here is they're trying to do exactly what they did then, was they're trying to provide a clarification as to what readily means. And they've done a horrible job at it. In fact, the Legislative Council there in California, basically said that language, that definition, that term would be rendered void for vagueness if anyone decided to sue on it. So what they're trying to do here is avoid such a ruling. Should this go to case, because it's already go to court, because it's already gone to court. But they're trying to clarify so that they can say, well, it's real clear what readily convertible means. Well, if you say it's clear, then it's got to be clear enough to where a block of aluminum does not constitute owning of a firearm.
Yes. Absolutely. And it even goes beyond that, because if you have and there are a lot of people that do have 3D printers, and just by having a 3D printer, you could be running afoul of the law just because you could readily convert some HDPE into a receiver.
If you have that, and you have the parts necessary, the other firearm parts necessary. I mean, if you're a person who dabbles and is always working on their gun, and you have extra spare firearm, you can literally be found guilty of constructive possession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
By the way, for those of you who do not know, constructive possession means you have all of the parts to illegally make a firearm.
Yeah, we can't prove you've done it yet, but we can prove you could have done it.
There you go.
Next story I've got here, this is off Erie News Now, and why it's big news in Erie, Pennsylvania, I'm not really sure, but HPD, meaning the Honolulu Police Department, approves first concealed carry permit for unknown applicant. We're 6 months past. I think today we're 6 months past the Bruin decision, and this came out yesterday. Chief Joe Logan signed the first license to carry a concealed firearm in Honolulu County, 6 months after Bruin. And this is, even New Jersey, even New York are doing better than Honolulu. This is what's your take, man?
Well, Honolulu or the state of Hawaii figured in the Ninth Circuit they could get away with not issuing concealed carry permits. They could basically just get away with saying, yeah, no, you don't have a right to possess a firearm outside of your home. And until the Young decision gets ruled against, until the Supreme Court steps up and says, yeah, no, you're going to have to, or the Ninth Circuit, in this case now the Ninth Circuit, since they've been told to rethink their position by the Supreme Court, their attitude has always been, yeah, well, you know what? We're not going to issue. We're not even going to bother. We're not even going to put the mechanisms in place for you to be able to do it. And so once now that they realize, okay, yeah, we're going to have to do it, it literally took them forever to figure out how to. I mean, they had no real incentive to do something that they didn't want to do.
Now, this particular sheriff has been on the record before saying, I want to do this. I'm a Second Amendment supporter. I want to go ahead and issue these. And the proof is in the actions, not the words.
Well, no, in some cases, and maybe I'll have his back a little bit, just in that, keep in mind, he has to deal with getting approval for stuff from the state. So they're the ones that have got to approve for him to be able to do stuff. So we don't know what sort of roadblocks the state of Hawaii put in his way for him to be able to issue these permits. Now, he easily could have just said, okay, well, I'm going to issue these permits and they're at least good inside of my jurisdiction. But then again, you don't know what cities or towns or local police chiefs might actually go out of their way to then arrest people. So not knowing the internal politics there in that particular state or with that county, it is outrageous that it's taken them this long to get it going. But I can't say that there aren't probably some valid excuses.
Okay. Get a comment in here. This going back to our last story. 500 Magnum says they want to railroad all of us like they did Randy Waver and Matt Hoover. Going back to, well, you could do this, so we're going to assume you will do this, and we're going to charge you with it.
Yep, that's pretty much it. It's we're clearly, because we are the evil gun owners, we are going to break the law. Yeah,
and for those that didn't catch the rundown here a little bit ago, I remember we talked about a story where they were saying there was going to be right-wing violence against immigrants if Title 42 fell, and they tried tying these attacks on power infrastructure to right-wingers when, and correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, I don't recall anybody being even under suspicion, let alone arrested and identified from those power line attacks. Yet, obviously, they're right-wing extremists.
Well, because in one case, at least, they used a gun to shoot it out. So obviously, it must be a right-wing extremist. Because, well, liberal environmentalists would never engage in such behavior.
No, and would never ever touch a firearm.
Oh, I do declare.
Next story I got, Craig. This one off mystateline.com. Illinois group launches new ad to ban assault weapons. I'm going to read a little bit of it here. The Illinois legislature is preparing to take up new gun control measures, and an anti-violence group has launched a new ad to help get those measures passed. The ad from Protect Illinois Communities, what a great name. I mean, who would be against that? Features a mother's emotional plea for an assault-style weapons ban in the state. The article's hitting all the right notes. It's emotional. It's it's let's do something. But let's be clear here. If this does pass the legislature, SAF, Firearms Policy Coalition, GOA, NRA are all going to be filing suit post haste. And if they do pass it, they're going to owe a whole lot of attorney's fees to a whole lot of gun rights groups, because this is never going to stand.
Well, and you're pretty much going to see their attorneys are going to, if they have like a legislative council like we do here in California, their legislative council is going to recognize the fact that there is a significant amount of pending legislation questioning the legality of such bans, and that in light of the Bruin decision, it's going to be very hard to justify such bans. The other thing I wanted to note was, and I looked up this group, I looked up this mother, and it's a very, very sad situation what happened with her 19-year-old daughter who was shot at a college party. But from everything that I'm reading, I don't know that a semi-automatic center fire rifle with a detachable magazine was used in that shooting. There's nowhere that it indicates that, and I'm guessing, because it took place, it was an argument at a party and someone started shooting. I'm guessing, like as is the case in most of these instances, it was a handgun. So then the question, once again, I will raise is, why are you talking about a quote unquote assault weapons?
Yeah, and let's again, going back to the 1994 assault weapons ban, it did no good. There was absolutely no effect on crime that could be found, even as far as today. And so why are we going through all this again, other than we want to appease Biden and make him feel good on his way to retirement?
Well, because, and here's the thing, man, liberals don't care, and I'm sorry, I know there are probably some liberals who watch the show, but let me just be real with you about your folk. You don't care about the actual impact of legislation. Liberals care about the intent of legislation. And when I say the intent, I don't mean, the secret intent of the legislation. I mean, if someone says that passing a $1 tax increase will end world hunger, their attitude is it'll end world hunger. Even though you and I both know, even though logically anyone who knows and understands knows that it won't, they're still going to support it because, well, the intent is all that really counts. And by the way, if you are a Democrat, your intent is always good and noble and honorable. If you're a Republican, your intent is always evil, right? So let's ignore what the outcome is of your legislation, the actual effects are of your legislation. Or your policies. They're going to focus on the intent.
Let me get up this comment from 500 Magnum. I hadn't heard of this one yet. National backgrounds on ammo sales. That's completely ridiculous, even for them. I hadn't heard about that one out of the federal government yet. Had you, Craig?
No, well, I have heard that this is something that is being discussed, but I have not seen that it has actually been put into legislation. I can tell you that it was something that was proposed here in California. It's been proposed a couple of times, and it's failed. It's actually failed the two times that it's been introduced. And I'm guessing that at the federal level, there's absolutely positively no way such a tax is going to be acceptable. It's basically a modern day poll tax.
Well, and they would have to get it done in the next week and a half.
Yeah, good luck with that.
because it will never go through the House once the change of guard happens.
Well, and there are too many. I don't see in the Senate the way in which it's comprised right now. I do not see Joe Manchin supporting something like that.
No, and he would have to.
Yes, they would have to get his support. I also think you could lose Kristen Sinema behind it as well.
Next story, I'm calling this one "Making Perfect the Enemy of the Good." I found this one off of WATE.com. Knoxville senator files bill to reimburse gun safety course fees. There's a senator in Tennessee that filed SB 0021. It would knock $30 off the cost of someone taking a first-time gun safety course. And believe it or not, the big opponents here are gun rights activists, at least in this story. They're saying, well, why should we pay for it? Look, pal, if we can get people to take real gun safety courses, and it only costs the state $30 per person, I'm failing real hard to see the downside here.
My question is, okay, are you a tax group, or are you or is this a tax group, or is this a gun rights group? Here's a bill that does not mandate that you take a gun safety course. It just encourages. And let's be real, the impact of most tax policy is not about raising revenue. It's about affecting behavior, right? There's a reason we have a cigarette tax, why we have a tobacco tax, or a tobacco tax. There's a reason why we have an alcohol tax. There's a reason why we have it on junk foods and all of these in various different places. And why not encourage if we're going to be doing stuff like this, why not provide an incentive? And once again, we're talking about, in this case, a tax credit, right? We're not penalizing you for doing something bad. We're rewarding you for doing something good. Because I'm be honest with you, there are a lot of gun owners who go and buy a gun and they never bother to learn basic gun safety. They never learn how to use their firearm effectively or efficiently. And my attitude is, you ought to always have an attitude of training and learning and being better and being sharp with your firearm, so that when the time comes that you need to use it, you need to be proficient with it. You need to know how to use it and have sufficient training to do that. And why not encourage people to take that first step down the path towards becoming a prepared firearm owner?
Amen. I got a great comment here that I want to get up. Democrats will give away free drug paraphernalia and Republicans have trouble paying for firearms training? That from C&T Designs and Arms. I'm right there with you, man. I'm right there with you.
And by the way, this is not a Republican group. This is a firearms group. I don't know if they're Republican or not. I'm guessing there's probably some Republicans in the group. But it's a firearm group that is opposing this. And they're opposing it based on taxation issues?
Yeah, and let's be real. $30 per person that takes this course. I'm guessing that we're going to be saving so much money from people actually learning how firearms work that the $30 is just a tiny drop in the bucket and will cause savings going forward for the state.
It wouldn't surprise me one bit. But once again, I think you need to figure. This group needs to figure out. Once again, are they a tax group? Are they a Republican conservative group, or are they a firearms rights organization? If they're a firearms rights organization, anybody who encourages, whether it's a tax credit for to buy a safe, all right, whether it's a tax credit to take firearms training. Whether it's a tax credit if you decide to buy your first firearm for home defense, I'm all for. In this particular case, as a firearms group. Now, as a tax advocate, there's arguments there. But as a firearms advocate, the idea of using tax policy to encourage good behavior, I don't think you have a leg to stand on and argue against it.
last story here for today. We all know about Oregon's Measure 114 that just squeaked by the voters in November and has been locked up in legal challenges ever since. It has not gone into effect. This story off of AmmoLand, going to read a little bit of it. State of Oregon wants the completed criminal background check tenet of Measure 114 to take effect now. Harney County Circuit Judge Robert Riccio put the brakes on again, saying he would decide by January 3rd whether to continue blocking that part of the measure, according to KGW News. One part, Craig, of Measure 114 is that as it stands federally, after 3 business days, the FFL can decide whether to give you the gun if the background check hasn't come back. What Measure 114 says is no matter how long it takes, that background check has to come back before you can release the firearm. If it's 31 days, it's 31 days. Oh, by the way, the criminal background check is only good for 30 days, so you got to restart, recycle, rinse, and repeat. And the judges said, well, we're not gonna let this go into effect until I can fully consider it, which according to the story is now January 3rd. I'm just thinking this is a way to totally deny new firearms purchases going forward. What do you think, man?
Well, so keep in mind that this is not the only issue for which this measure is in court. You actually have the Department of Justice, or the people who hand firearms, implementation of firearms law there in Oregon, asking for it to be held back because they don't know how exactly they're going to pay for the new gun permit process. Right? They're requiring you to go get a gun permit to be able to exercise your right to own a firearm, kind of like you do in New Jersey, or you have to do in I believe Chicago. You got to go get that permit first, then you can go buy a gun and go through a background check. I digress. I think in the end, what their goal is to make the process long, to make it expensive, and to make it cost prohibitive, and to delay, to make it so that it's too much of a hassle for an individual to be able to go and get a firearm. So and let's be honest. Yes, it'll make it so that you give up, and because the concept is generally when it comes to civil rights, is a right delayed is a right denied, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. Is they're trying to deny those rights.
All right, let me get a comment up here real quick. 500 Magnum says, do you think we'll ever see the end of background checks on firearms sales? Honestly, I don't know when it will happen, but I do think it will happen because they weren't around in 1791. I think it will happen. Is it going to happen next week? No. Is it going to happen next year? No. Will it eventually happen? I think so. What do you think, Craig?
I'm not so confident that it will eventually happen, because you've got folks. How do I want to put this? I think that there's enough in terms of public opinion that a background check is innocuous and doesn't really do anything wrong except delay, especially in states in places where you have like automatic approval, because they've already determined it's less than 5. It's almost instantaneous with the NICS background check.
Yeah.
Very few cases does it go beyond 3 to 5 minutes for the background check for NICS. I just think that the Supreme Court, even in its current makeup, will err on the side of, okay, we'll give you this one. And I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying that as a realistic measure, just much the same way that you had Scalia say, well, this doesn't mean that you can't have some reasonable regulation of firearms. I think that'll fall into the reasonable regulation in their eyes.
I think you could be right there. Ideally, I would like to see it that you could anonymously walk into a gun store, cash and carry a firearm. That would be my ultimate You know?
Well, you'll be nice. The thing is that as long as you have, for example, see what I would like to do is not so much that I think that we need to get back to finding a way to keep violent criminals, people who've been convicted of violent crimes, from being able to possess firearms. I don't say felonies, because there are too many felonies that are non-violent, that have nothing to do with whether or not someone is going to commit violence. Much the same way, now in many states you have misdemeanors like domestic violence and assault misdemeanors, which I'm like, if it's that bad, it should be a felony, but I digress. If you that are at least temporarily prohibiting, like in places like California, I think that they're going to protect, the Supreme Court is going to protect the ability to keep guns out of the hands of violent people, or people who have demonstrated and been convicted of violent crimes. And so that's the reason why I'm finding a real hard time seeing that ever really happen.
Well, and I would like to point out, Martha Stewart is a felon. Does anybody think that Martha Stewart's going to go buy a handgun and take down a 7-Eleven?
I don't know. I guess it depends on how the stock portfolio is doing.
Yeah.
She's put it this way, if she's a Republican, you can bet that the left believes she is guilty. She is possible of doing such.
You bet. Let me get a couple more comments in here. We're going to get out of here because my chest is just... I'm not 100% yet, folks. I apologize. So it's going to be a shorter show today. But 500 Magnum says, we all know background checks are just a way for the government to know what guns we have. And Pete over at Gun Website says, in my opinion, yes, we will see the end of background checks. Focus has been made on the lack of any effectiveness of them, and eventually public opinion will change on the waste of time and the money they represent.
I will say for the last comment, you have a much higher opinion of public opinion than I do. I don't see them ever being, especially when they're continually being misled by the mainstream media. Unless the media changes, as our good friend Mike says, control the media, control the message, control the minds. As long as anti-gunners are in the majority within the mainstream media, they will continue to ignore the ineffectiveness of background checks. The other thing is the comment before from 500 was it 500
Magnum, yeah,
500 Magnum. There is, and what I believe a background check should be is this: is you go in, you give them your name, your social security number, whatever it is. They look you up. Are you on the list of people not allowed to own firearms? Nope. Okay, you get to buy your gun. No information is retained. No, they don't get any of your information. All they do is they check and see if you're on the list. If you're not on the list, that's it. That's what a background check should be. But what it is, in many cases, is, as he stated, it's a way in which it's a backdoor to creating a registry of who owns what firearms. That is not a background check. That is, in fact, simply an attempt to register firearms with the intent of eventually confiscating them.
My apologies. I had to clear a cough there. I think we're gonna go ahead and start setting this one down. The other thing I would mention is, yes, a lot of it has to do with a lot of public opinion has to do with what media has to say. But I would remind you, Craig, you are the media. I am the media, and we are growing. The alternative media is growing, continues to grow, and I think that has the mainstream media. That's why they're going farther left, is because they see that the alternative media is growing and is more centrist, and so they just keep running farther left. What's your thought there?
Well, I think we saw from the release of the Twitter files just how much left wing. You have the intelligentsia, left wing intelligentsia. You've got the government agencies, law enforcement, led by political left wing politicos. They are scared that we are sharing information that not only is the truth, but that not only is differing from what they believe, but happens to in fact be valid and be the truth. And they're doing their best to try and make sure that they suppress it. We talked about it on the rundown. They're throttling groups like the Second Amendment Foundation, like the Firearms Policy Coalition. They're throttling shows like The Bullet and The Rundown because we are sharing information that is against the government, the left-wing government narrative. And so we still have a long way to go, but you're right, we are growing. And hopefully we'll have an ability to attract people who are interested in the truth. I don't just want to preach to the choir. I want people who want to hear all of the information so that they can make a decision for themselves.
Amen. Well, we are going to set it aside here, folks. Craig, on the way out, we plugged it a couple times, but would you please again plug the rundown? And how's Morning Coffee with Craig going? Is that still 2 days a week?
It's still 2 days a week over there at the Firearms Policy Coalition on YouTube and on Facebook. But you can also find the rundown 5 days a week, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. If you want to watch us on OpsLens or listen to the podcast, that's available an hour later. The program is available for you to be able to watch at your leisure.
All right, very cool. On my end, I'm sorry that this is the first day I've been able to put more than 2 sentences together without hacking up a lung. And so I decided to make a go of it today, but it's really taxing on me. So we're going to go ahead and shut this one down. Come join me 5 p.m. tomorrow for the Friday legal edition of The Bullet. Alex Uli will be here. We'll be talking about the legal end of the Second Amendment. And on Saturday, Saturday's New Year's Eve. We're not doing a show, so do come join me tomorrow, Friday, for the legal edition of The Bullet. And that's going to do it for us today, folks. Thanks, and we'll see you